This video is for Homework and Mastery 1.2, Section 3.3 in your textbook, Equations and Geometric Formulas. What we're wanting to do here is look at formulas for geometric figures, their equations, and how to solve for them. The first one that we're looking at is perimeter. Remember, perimeter is the amount of space around an object. How far does it go around something? When we're looking at perimeter, the perimeter of the area is twice the length, because I have two sides of length, plus twice the width, 2. Because again, perimeter is adding up all the sides. 1, 2, 3, 4 sides. So perimeter for a rectangle is P is equal to twice the length plus twice the width. The perimeter for the square is slightly different, because remember that square, all the sides are equal. So I have S, 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 and S. So the perimeter for a square is 4S. P is equal to 4S. So let's use these two formulas and try some examples. The first one is we want to find the perimeter of a rectangle with length 12 feet and width 8 feet. Recall from the previous slide that the perimeter is 2 times the length plus 2 times the width. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace our L with our 12 and replace our W with our 8, which is what I've done here. I can multiply 2 times 12 feet, and I can multiply 2 times 8 feet, and I'll get 24 feet plus 16 feet. I can add those. 24 feet plus 16 feet gives me a total of 40 feet. So for this particular problem, the perimeter is 40 feet. Let's look at this problem. The length of a rectangle is 4 times the width. If the perimeter of the rectangle is 50 feet, find the width. Well, this one doesn't actually tell me what the width is or the length. It tells me what the perimeter is, and it tells me how to judge the width. So, again, we'll use this formula. But in this time, we know that the P is going to be 50, and we know that the length is 4 times the width. So we can actually replace our L with 4W. So I now have 50 is equal to 2 times 4W plus 2W. And I'm going to be solving for W, which represents width, which is what the question is asking me to find. So I'll multiply 2 times 4W, and I'll get 8W. I'll combine like terms, 8W plus 2W, and get 10W. I now have 50 is equal to 10W. I need to solve for W, so this is 10 times W. The opposite of multiplication is going to be to divide both sides by 10. When I do that, 50 divided by 10 will give me 5, and these 10s cancel each other out. Therefore, the width is 5 feet. Now I can check myself by plugging in a 5 for this W and a 5 for this W, and seeing if I end up with 50 on the other side. It's always good to check yourself out. Let's look at area. A parallelogram is a 4-sided figure in which both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. This is an example of a parallelogram. Now then, a square is an example of a parallelogram, and so is a rectangle. The area of a rectangle is length times width. The area of a square is side squared. And the area of a parallelogram is base times height. Based off of those, I want to find the area of a rectangle with a length of 4 feet and a width of 3 feet. Remember that the area of a rectangle is length times width. Well, in this case, I was given the length and I was given the width. My length was 4 feet and my width was 3 feet. I'm going to do some commutative and associative properties and move my coefficients together, and I'm going to move my units together. 4 times 4 is going to give me 12, and this feet times feet gives me what we consider feet squared. We'll discuss exponents later on in the semester, but this is a good time to realize that area is always feet squared. So my area for a rectangle that has length of 4 feet and width of 3 feet has an area of 12 feet. What about this parallelogram? Find the height of a parallelogram with a base of 5 meters and an area of 45 meters squared. Well, I know that the area is equal to your base times your height. My problem did not give me my height. That's what I'm wanting to solve for. But it did give me my area, and it did give me my base. So I'm going to replace the area with 45 and the base with 5, as I've shown here. Now I have 45 equals 5h. I can divide both sides by 5, canceling these 5's out. 45 divided by 5 is 9. So the height of this parallelogram is 9 meters. Remember, when you are answering word problems like this, make sure that you always include the units on your answers, and you don't just say h is equal to 9. You need to relate it back to your original problem. Okay, let's look at this figure. I want to find the area of the following shape made of rectangles. Okay, how do I even start that? Let me just say, this is not drawn to scale, and do not assume that anything is ever drawn to scale. Okay? But I'm going to suggest that we divide it into 3 different rectangles. Rectangle 1 is made of this area. Rectangle 2 is made of this area. Rectangle 3 is made of this area. And once I get the area of each of those, then I can add them and I can get the total area. Well, I know that for the rectangle 1, I know that my base is 7 and my height is 8. So I can take 7 times 8, which I have here, and get the area of this first rectangle is 56 meters squared. But what about this second one? Do I know how long this red line is? Actually, I do. Because if this amount right here is a total of 8 meters, and this is 4 meters, how much is left here? That's correct. It's actually 4 meters. That's why I said it's not drawn to scale, because it should have gone halfway, but it's not. So this red line is actually 4 meters long. So rectangle 2 has a height of 4 meters and a base of 5 meters. So I have 5 times 4, which is 20 meters squared. Rectangle 3, well, its height is this side over here, 12 meters, and its base is this part down here, which is 6 meters. So I'm going to do 12 times 6 and get 72 meters squared. Okay, I found the area of each individual rectangle. Now I want to find the area of the entire figure. So I add up each of these areas. I take 56 plus 20 plus 72 and get a total of 148 meters squared. So just because you're given this strange figure doesn't mean you can't solve it. You may just have to approach it a little bit differently and divide it up. And again, do not assume that things are drawn to scale. So we've looked at perimeter and we've looked at area. Let's look at volume. The volume of a rectangular solid is the product of the length times the width times the height. So when we're talking about volume, it's length times our width times our height. So find the unknown side of the rectangular solid. The volume is 224 meters cubed. The height is 8 meters and the width is 4 meters. Okay, so I actually don't know the length. I need to find the length, but I already know the volume. So I'm going to use volume is equal to length times width times height and substitute in. I'm going to place 224 in for volume. I'll place 8 in for my height and 4 in for my width. I can simplify 8 times 4 and get 32. I now have 224 is equal to 32L. If I divide both sides by 32, I'll get that L is 7. But remember, I haven't answered the question yet. The length is 7 meters. Always remember to go back and relate it to your problem. Here's another example. The blueprints for an office building show that the length of the entryway is 12 feet and the width is 9 feet. The tile for the entryway costs $25 per square yard. How many square yards of tile must be purchased for the entryway? How much will the tile cost? Okay, so we've got two different questions here, and we need to start with how do we approach this problem? Well, there's something called a mathematical blueprint. The first step of a mathematical blueprint is to gather facts. The first fact that we can gather is the dimensions of the entryway. 12 feet by 9 feet. The other fact that we know is that the tile for the entryway costs $25 per square yard. Okay, so those are my facts. The second step of a mathematical blueprint, we ask ourselves, what am I asked to do? In other words, what are the questions asking? The first question asked us to determine the number of square yards of tile. The second question asked us to find the total cost for the tile. Okay, so those are my two questions that I'm being asked to do. The third step of a mathematical blueprint is to ask yourself, how do I even proceed? What do I need to do? This one actually has a few things that I'm going to have to do. If you go back and look at the problem, our problem gave us that the entryway was 12 feet by 9 feet. But we want to find square yards. So I need to convert feet to yards first. The second thing is I'll need to find the area of the entryway. This way I can determine how many tile there are. Once I find out the area of the entryway, I'll need to multiply it by $25 to find out the amount that I'll be using to purchase the tile. After we know what we're going to need to do, we need to look at some key points to remember. First one, there's 3 feet in 1 yard. area is equal to length times width. Okay, so we've mapped out our blueprint. Let's get to work. We want to solve the problem. Remember that the length is 12 feet and the width was 9 feet. First thing I need to do is convert to yards. I need to divide each of these by 3 because remember there's 3 feet in 1 yard. So when I do that, 12 feet divided by 3 will give me 4 yards. 9 feet divided by 3 will give me 3 yards. So now then, I can find the area, and the area will be 4 yards by 3 yards, which will give me 12 yards squared. So that answers question A. I need 12 square yards of tile. The second question was how much is the tile going to cost if it costs $25 per square yard? So I need to take my 12 square yards and multiply it by $25. And I'll get that it's going to cost $300 for the tile. A couple of things to think about here is when you're looking at a word problem, think about this mathematical blueprint that we just went through. We want to gather the facts, ask ourselves, what are we being asked to do? Then ask, how do I proceed? Then we want to ask ourselves, what are things that I need to remember? Okay? We want to do these things in order to lay out the items. If we just look at the problem, we kind of sit there a little bit stunned and not knowing what to do. But if we follow these steps, it helps us lay things out, and it takes that fear of the actual word problems away from us a little bit. And it gives us our power back. If you need help, let one of us know.